You're listening to the Unwritable Rant podcast with your host and bourbon-soaked storyteller, Juliette Miranda.
Y'all, I have to tell you about my new favorite thing here in the French Quarter. It's called Legs and Eggs, and it is a burlesque brunch. Now, I realize that concept might sound a little bit unconventional, but what the hell, so is New Orleans. This is a city that loves its brunches. And burlesque is just one of the many side attractions you can add on to your lazy Sunday meal. I mean, you could hear live jazz, you could play drag queen bingo, but burlesque is my favorite. And not just because of the bottomless mimosas. I just love burlesque dancing. It's sensual without being gratuitous, it's artful, and the costumes are just gorgeous. Now, don't get me wrong, I do love a good strip show too, just not while I'm eating my Cajun Eggs Benedict. The reopening of strip clubs here in the French Quarter was swift once restrictions were lifted. But apparently not all of the dancers were excited to return. At least that's my assumption, given the flood of flyers and ads that I'm seeing from clubs who are looking to hire dancers. Most of them even welcome amateurs to apply, which, as a potential customer, isn't exactly an attraction. Believe me, I understand that you gotta practice to get better. It's just that, as a strip club customer, it takes more than a naked chick to get me interested. There needs to be talent and tease along with the tits. Because few things are worse than a bad stripper. And I can say this because I was one. Back in college, I had a very short-lived career as a stripper with my best friend Crazytown. Being a stripper definitely was not a career goal of mine. It was something my dangerously irresistible girlfriend talked me into as a way to earn quick cash. And I was terrible at it. I mean, resoundingly Elizabeth Berkley in Showgirls bad at stripping. It wasn't that I didn't try or that I had any moral qualms against it. In fact, I think maybe I tried too hard. Too many years of ballet had made me ultra conscious of things like my posture, and so, well, I was just too busy pointing my toes that I didn't realize I was coming off as stiff and uncompromising instead of seductive and pliable. Crazytown, however, was a natural. She knew just how to handle an audience of dudes armed with dollar bills, and within seconds could have everyone in the room convinced she was there just for them. Me, I'd be so busy sizing up a situation and intellectualizing everything that half a song could go by before I would even think to shake my ass. Our very last night stripping together did not end well. Crazytown booked us to work a private party that I'm pretty sure she knew was hosted by low-level mobsters. We were barely into our set when an angry wife broke things up in an astoundingly violent fashion. Furniture broke, eyes were blackened, and we were forced to make a scary run for the car. Now, if you want to hear that full story, you're going to have to go back to episode 100. But this isn't a story about stripping, exactly. It's a story about what happened with me in Crazytown after that last strip show ended. And fair warning, y'all, the aftermath is not pretty. After hightailing it to the car, me, Crazytown, and our bodyguard Beefcake wound up in an all-night, no-questions-asked kind of truck stop. We'd been forced to leave most of our stuff behind at the party, which meant that the only things we had to cover our skimpy stripper costumes were a large overcoat and sweatshirt that belonged to Beefcake. Crazytown had lost her shoes in a tussle with that crazed wife. But that didn't stop her from stomping her fishnet-clad feet right into the restaurant and demanding a plate of cheese fries as if nothing was out of the ordinary. And that was the problem. To Crazytown, this was just another night. When her food arrives, she dives in with disturbing zeal. Apparently, she'd worked up quite an appetite after nearly being killed. She stuffs a fistful of gooey fries into her mouth and pauses before reaching back for more. She holds out her hand and examines it, and with her mouth still full of food, proudly lets us know that she broke 3 nails while scratching that angry wife's face. There was a time when I might have applauded, and maybe even boasted about my own bruises and scrapes. But not now. Even Beefcake, our unshakable guardian and friend, well, even he was at a loss for words because this had been reckless beyond the point of okay. I couldn't blame Crazytown for everything that went down. I mean, I had the option of walking out like a normal person when I saw just how sketchy that party was. But the fighting, the gleeful recap, the clear interest in doing it all again, more and more my nights out with Crazytown were ending in preventable disaster. We'd been best friends for 6 or so years now, and while the insanity of our friendship had once been endearing, it had become exhausting. Stripping with Crazytown wasn't whimsical, it wasn't cute, and it definitely was not fun. And I look at my friend and I say, I'm not doing this again. Beefcake nods too. When he agreed to accompany us to these private strip shows, he figured he'd be lording over a room of college guys. Just kids that he could easily overtake if needed. Crazytown pulling mob gigs out of her cocked hat was just too much. And it begged the question, if this, then what next? She looks at us both, and contempt is just vibrating behind her eyes. She wants to know what's wrong with us. This is easy money, she explains. You two are acting like a couple of pussies. She'd been calling me that a lot lately, and quite honestly, it had lost its sting. There was too much in my future to risk on easy money, so I tell her, find yourself another stripper, girlie. I'm out. I get up from the table and walk back to the car alone. It was the first time I had ever given Crazytown a firm no, and as much as I knew it was the right thing to do, I still didn't like how it felt. Crazytown waits a few minutes before coming after me. That girl is all kinds of a hot mess with her tangled hair and smeared makeup. And maybe it was a trick of the dingy truck stop lights, but she looked smaller than usual. She grabs my hands and begins to talk. At first, it's her usual run-on please, but her tone changes when my face doesn't. Look, she says, I know you have this big, illustrious future in Los Angeles ahead of you, but I don't. It was a rare moment of gravity from Crazytown. The previous year, she had dropped out of state college in favor of a less demanding community school. But she wasn't in any rush to complete her education there either, even with her parents threatening to cut her off if she didn't choose a career path. Any path. Nothing seemed to suit her, and whenever I brought up the subject of the future, she'd just dismiss it with a live in the moment, baby. Now, though, I could see Crazytown was more scared than she let on. I need this, she said. And if you're not going to do it with me, at least help me make it something I can do on my own. Even in the dark, I could see how much this meant to her. And although I wasn't entirely sure what this was or what she wanted me to do with it, I agreed. The next day, Crazytown fills me in on her plan. She wants to make a business out of stripping. Not just her, but lots of girls. Like an adult entertainment business, she says. We can hire girls out for private parties as strippers or topless waitresses. And as she outlines this to me, I had to admit it wasn't a terrible idea. Of all the jobs in the world, this really did seem like something Crazytown could handle. I mean, it certainly wouldn't be boring, and it definitely had the right amount of danger to suit her. According to Crazytown, all I had to do was help her set it up. Right, lady. I've heard that from her enough times to know that just setting things up also meant running everything while she's off fucking somebody's brother or uncle, and then taking the fall when everything turns to crap. Not this time, Crazytown. If she wanted a business, it was going to have to be legit, and she was going to have to do the work to make it happen. So I lay out my rules. I would be a consultant only. And for that, she was going to pay me a consulting fee just as soon as the business started making money. I'd help her develop a business plan. I would get her all the paperwork she needed to register and apply for a license. And then the rest would be on her. I look my friend in the eyes and I say, I mean it. This is your rabbit hole, not mine. And I heard her use the word. She said, yes, I understand. I thought she meant it. Setting up an adult entertainment business wasn't nearly as complicated as I expected. I mean, really, the business model is pretty damn close to what Uber uses today. You just swap the drivers out for strippers. Hell, I even managed to turn my research into an independent study credit at school, which, well, I thought was kind of a neat little trick on my part. Within a few weeks, we had the framework for what Crazytown decided to call Heavenly Bodies. It wasn't the most original name on the planet, but at least it was accurate. I handed over all the paperwork for her to make it official, and then I congratulated her on the launch of her very own, completely legitimate business. And that was about the time when we began our slow descent into friendship hell. On the surface, everything seemed fine. Crazytown had opened a business banking account. She started advertising in places other than truck stops and was making the rounds to recruit dancers. Except she wasn't especially discriminating about it. Crazytown was approaching random girls at the mall and the gas station as though stripping was some sort of business opportunity like Amway or the Pampered Chef. When she told me about that, I suggested that maybe it might be a good idea to, qualify these chicks, maybe find out if they're at least halfway decent dancers and not psychos before bringing them on board. I tell her, maybe you should even look into doing background checks. I mean, it was a reasonable suggestion, but when I say that, Crazytown just shudders. She hadn't been thrilled about any of my efforts to keep her business respectable, and apparently took this last idea as an insult to her instincts. She mumbles something about how I'm judgy enough without the paperwork, and when I ask her what she means by that, she just kind of shrugs and tells me to forget it. She'd been dropping all sorts of little zingers like that on me over the last couple of weeks, and it was starting to get really uncomfortable. But not as uncomfortable as 2 days later, when my mother appears at my bedroom door and she has some very awkward questions for me. She informs me that I have 2 visitors in the living room, neither of whom she recognizes and both wanting to know where they should get set up. My mother looks relieved to see that I am just as confused as she is. And she says, well, maybe these girls have the wrong house? Sadly, that was not the case. They were a gift from Crazytown. I find the girls sitting on the couch, and from the back, they seem harmless enough. But as I walk around to greet them, I'm shocked to see that they are very nearly naked. Both of them are wearing bikini tops and tiny little skirts, which wasn't exactly the kind of attire one normally selects for fucking November in the Midwest. And I am so shocked. The only thing I can think to ask is if they had clothing on when they rang the doorbell, as if this will give me some sort of clue as to what the hell it is they want. The blonder of the 2 girls giggles and she says, duh, we wore coats. And then she motions to 2 tiny fuzzy cover-ups dangling from hooks by the front door. The coats are tattered and fuzzy and they look like something Russian streetwalkers would wear. And then it dawns on me exactly who these chicks are. They're potential strippers. And possibly hookers. Crazytown had sent them to me to audition. And as soon as that light bulb pops on over my head, the girls stand, wobbling slightly on their impossibly high heels, and ask where they should show me their stuff. I wanted to see none of their stuff, especially not in my parents' living room. So I hand both the chicks their Muppet coats and inform them loud enough from my mother's eavesdropping ears that they have the wrong house. As I push them toward the door, the other blonde leans in close to whisper in my ear. Her breath is warm and smells vaguely of ranch dressing, and she says, I could, get you off if that would be better. She's looking at me with the expression of a too eager and very vacant starlet. And I have to fight back the urge to bring her back inside and offer her, soup, or whatever else I could find in the house that would save her from a future of side street handjobs and low-budget porn. Where the fuck had Crazytown found these chicks? I shove them toward their car and close the door before they can make any other untoward offers, hoping for my parents' sake that they don't proposition any neighbors on the way out. My next move is to find Crazytown. She and her cat had recently moved into the guest house that allegedly belonged to a family friend, and the place was far nicer than she would normally have been able to afford. I find her wrapped in a blanket and sipping from a large coffee mug on the back patio. She does not look surprised to see me and asks, So, what did you think of the girls? What do I think? I think they're better suited to the fucking bunny ranch, Crazytown. And in case you forgot, prostitution is illegal in Illinois. She just shrugs and asks, Who would ever find out? She says this with confidence, as if she has already made up a secret menu of a la carte sex options and is ready to just roll them on out. I sit down on the edge of her lawn chair and look at Crazytown. Her face is blank, which worries me even more than her usual chaotic look would, and I ask, Are you okay? There is nothing in her face that says she is okay except her lips, which she curls into a weak smile as she says, I'd make a pretty good madam, don't you think? No, girlie, I don't. I tell her, you have a legit business started here. Don't turn it into some shady underground hustle. Again, I get that empty shrug, and she asks, Are you going to charge me for that advice? Great. She'd gone from blank to bitch, and I really wasn't in the mood to deal with it. The previous week, she'd given me my consulting fee, the one that we'd agreed to earlier on, and although I said it could wait and that she should keep the cash for expenses, she slid the envelope into my purse and said that I had earned it and that I could use it for the future. And I had earned it, and I knew I needed it, which was why I took the money, but her look now made me wish I hadn't, and I didn't know what to do about that. The air is thick as we stare each other down. Everything is between us. Money, resentment, fear. I knew I should say something. Maybe explain that I just wanted to help her, but the words would be a cover for what we both knew was coming. Instead, I get up and tell her that I have to get to class. And she is silent as I walk away. Several weeks go by without a word from Crazytown. It was a relief, partly because if she was running a brothel, I did not want to know about it. But mostly, I didn't want to have to tell her the truth, that I didn't want to be friends anymore. I didn't like me with her, and really, I wasn't even sure how much I liked her now, which sucked. It sucked so much because Crazytown had so much going for her, if only she would quit acting like a crazed child. But how are you supposed to break up with a friend? Is that even a thing? I mean, breaking up with a guy, no problem, because really, who cared? There would be more. But there would never be another Crazytown. And honestly, I would rather push her off a cliff than tell her our friendship had to end. A few more days go by in heavy silence until I get a call from Beefcake. He's worried about Crazytown. Apparently, she had given up her business and was instead stripping at Blackjack's, a very sleazy biker bar way off in the cornfields. It was the kind of place where you could buy shitty cocaine and very real guns, which probably explained why there were so many dancers there with bullet wounds. Beefcake had tried to convince Crazytown to quit, and she wasn't having it. He begged me to go talk some sense into her, and I'm hesitant because I know full well when Crazytown is on a spiteful tear, the only thing that will stop her is a literal brick wall. but Beefcake kept pleading with me, saying she needs you, she'll listen to you. You have to at least try. In our years of friendship, Crazytown and I had plummeted headfirst into danger more times than I could count. But it was always, for the most part, well-intentioned danger. It was danger in the name of us, whether it was crashing a school dance so we could relive our prom, or seducing an ex-boyfriend only to steal and destroy his prized guitar. Her chaos had become completely self-indulgent. She knew better than this, and what's more, she was better than this. So I have to admit, I wasn't exactly feeling charitable when I cut class to drive out to Blackjack's. It was indeed buried in the cornfields and surrounded by motorcycles. I'd arrived just in time for the lunch buffet, a rather tragic display of microwave pizza and Jell-O that had been squeezed out of its processed plastic cups and dumped into a large chipped bowl. The first person I see when I walk in is not Crazytown, but one of those blonde faux Russian hookers that had been in my living room. She is naked and sitting on the bar and urging two tough guys into doing suicide shots. There are lines of what I hope is salt on both of her thighs, and each guy leans in to snort one off. They knock back a shot of tequila, and as the big finale, she rubs lime into their eyes. I had heard of suicide shots before, but I always thought they were one of those urban legends, you know? I mean, I never really expected to see anyone dumb enough to do one. There's a lot of yelling and cheering, and after tossing each guy a dirty bar towel, the blonde stripper looks up and she sees me. She waves as though we are long-lost besties, and, well, I wave back because I didn't know what else to do. She runs up to hug me, blathering about how she and Crazytown were hired there together, and, oh, it's just so much fun to work with her. And then she says, you know, we could totally get you a job here. We could all work together. Wouldn't that be awesome? Wouldn't it just? Ugh. I just shake my head. A new song starts, which is her cue to hop back onto the bar, just as Crazytown steps out on stage. She's wearing white. It was always her favorite color to strip in, and for good reason. It practically glowed against her tan skin, making her look very much like one of those fallen angels bands are so fond of writing about. I catch her eye as she strides downstage, and I call out to her. Are you done now? You've made your point. That's what this was all about. She was showing us all, but mostly me, just how low she can sink. It was a typical Crazytown trick. But she's not done. She is far from it. And she turns her back to me in favor of the sticky pole in the center of the stage. So I try again, and I yell out, you don't have to do this. That catches her attention. And as she kneels down to collect a crumbled bill, she says, really? What the fuck else am I supposed to do? You're leaving, my parents cut me off. This is it. Please. That was dramatic even by Crazytown standards, because it really didn't have to be true. I lean in to make sure she hears me over the din of music and clacking of her heels, and I yell, you had a business, a real one. I set you up. Crazytown stops to kneel down in front of me. She's making it look like part of her routine, but what she says is anything but an act. Her blue eyes are icy. Any trace of her usual crazy love is replaced by venom as she leans in and says, you didn't set me up. You sold me out. It feels as though she has just sliced into my face with her fingernails. I fall backwards into a seat as if she had knocked me there, and I do my best to suck back the burning flush washing over me. I am embarrassed and mortified and, I hate to say it, enraged. Because all I could think in the moment was, who the fuck was she to say something like that? This is the same chick who had abandoned me in truck stops and malls and Mexico to fuck random guys. She's the same person who had fucked, at my last count, 4 of my boyfriends. And she is the same person who led me to a near-naked death at a party run by mobsters. All I had ever done, ever, was try to be her friend. So you know what? Fuck you, Crazytown. I'm done. The words come pouring out, surprising me and Crazytown, who had only ever known me to give in to her. She stops dancing. And maybe if I had been still enough, she could have said something to ease my anger. But I am too caught up in the years of frustration and annoyance that are just bubbling to the surface now, and I grab the first thing I see and I hurl it at Crazytown. Had I been thinking, I might have flung a drink in her direction. It really would have been satisfying to see the vicious splash a glass of Jack and Coke would make against what was left of her tiny white outfit. But I didn't grab a drink. I grabbed Jell-O. A handful of springy, stale strip club Jell-O that did not make the satisfying splatter I would have liked. Instead, it bounced. The globs were still in the shape of their plastic cups and had the springiness of a Super Bowl. So when hurled at Crazytown in my pathetic rage, they knocked right into her tits and bounced to the ground. Had anyone else made a move against her like that, Crazytown would have sprung at them, feet first. But with me, she didn't move. She stared, and I'm pretty sure, cried. It was the faux Russian hooker who lunged at me. Fortunately, she had neither the grace nor the agility of Crazytown and wound up face-planting into what was left of the buffet. And because this was the least of all fights that had broken out at this particular strip club, I was able to walk out with nothing but my conscience to assault me. I tried to see Crazytown at home the next day, and every day after that for the next week. She refused to let me in. When she did finally relent to talk to me, it was over the phone, and the conversation wasn't what it should have been. Our last words to each other were, "Grow up and fuck off." I suppose it's only fitting that a friendship as blazing and blinding as ours should end in flames. But I think I prefer it this way. I would much rather believe that we loved our friendship so much that we chose to destroy it, rather than letting time and age slowly snuff us out. I am not sorry that things ended between us, but I am sorry I couldn't tell her what she meant to me. I don't know if Crazytown ever thinks about me now, but if she does, I hope it's the same way I think of her. As a wild, occasionally dangerous, and utterly unforgettable friend. Cheers, y'all. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Unwritable Rant podcast. If you want to catch the first half of this story, you know, the one where Crazytown and I have that fateful last evening as strippers, go to episode 100. And if you want to find all of the back episodes of this podcast, just go to theunwritablerant.com. That's where all of my goodies live, including a fancy little link to buy me a drink. Click on it, you'll be taken to that secure PayPal page where you can make a one-time donation to keep me in booze. And when you do that, I will keep you in boozy stories. Be sure to also head over to youtube.com/Juliette Miranda. You'll find all sorts of fun videos there, adventures my guy and I have traveling and here in New Orleans, plus my live show. It's called Bourbon-Soaked Live, and we gather there on Monday nights at 7 p.m. Central Time to hang out. I do a couple of bourbon reviews, I drink, and we talk. So, I hope y'all have a great week. I'll be back soon to chat with y'all some more. Cheers.
Go to theunwritablerant.com and sign up to get early access to interviews and new videos. And don't forget to connect with Juliette on Twitter @MorningNeurosis.
Girl, you was pretty as a Sunday morning, standing on the corner at Carondelet. What you say we make our way up to Bourbon, a couple hurricanes and a hand grenade, and get blown away. Let the chips fall where they may. If it's all the same, what you say, bon ton, hey, pretty mama, I can smell the gumbo. Sweetest taste of honeysuckle on my lips. Good God Almighty, I can hear the trombone. Every heart ought to beat to a rhythm like this. Come a little closer, honey, let me hold you. Nothing tastes better than a bourbon kiss. You can be the flower on my magnolia. Every heart ought to beat to a rhythm like this.